Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Conley. How are you? I wanted to talk with you today about Chapter 3, Socialization. If I were to ask you the question, what determines human behavior? Is it heredity or is it social environment? We may have different opinions on what really determines human behavior. If you read the Down to Earth Sociology example on page 61 that talks about Jack and Oscar, identical twins, that'll give us a little more insight. The debate shows that while heredity does play a role in the human equation, it is society that makes people human. People learn what it means to be and consequently become members of human community through language, social interaction, and other forms of human contact. Now, Jack and Oscar, they were identical twins, separated at a very early age, raised by different people in different environments, and look at their outcomes as a result of that. But if you notice, when they were brought together later on in life, they did some behaviors similar that were very unique. And, we look and say, okay, but think about even within your own families. Are there things you do that are similar to, let's say, somebody of an older generation? Or do you find somebody of a younger generation is doing some of the same things you do? How much of that is social environment, or could it be heredity? Just a little thought there. Now, I want to talk with you about the examples in the book with the kids with little human contact. The first one are the feral children, also called wild children. Yes, they do actually exist. For different reasons, families send their kids out into the wilderness because they don't feel they're able to take care of the kids. What happens? Animals come and embrace these babies and toddlers and raise them. What happens as a result? They learn to walk on all fours. They eat grass, lap water from the river. They growl, tear into raw meat ravenously, and show an insensitivity to pain and cold. Now, just a little side tangent. I used to live in Arizona, and when I moved there from the Northeast, it's so true. People say your blood thins to accommodate the heat because it does get to 110 to 120 in the summertime. But then also when it gets to 50 or 60 degrees, that feels cold, whereas back east here, 50 or 60 degrees is, just wear a light jacket. My first winter in Arizona, I had on like a light sweater like this today. The second winter, I had on a heavier jacket. The third winter, I had on a coat when it dropped below a certain temperature. So it is true, your blood does thin. And perhaps when these feral children are brought in the wild, their bodies adapt to the conditions of wherever they are living in the wild. Now, people ask, how do these animals take care of the kids? Think about examples you've heard on the news in the zoos. You may have a gorilla raising another type of species, or I forgot some other examples, but there have been examples where two different species, the maternal instinct of the one species allowed for that mother to take care of an animal of another species, and perhaps that's what kicks in with these feral children. Second type of child with very little contact are isolated children. An example in the book on page 59 talks about Isabel. True story. When they found Isabel, she grunted, had very low or little language skills. But what the Isabel situation demonstrates is that humans do not have a natural language. Yes, we talk, but there is no natural language. But language is the key to human development. If discovered early enough, even isolated children can learn language and other age-appropriate skills. What happened to Isabel from the time they first received her, and then over the next 2 years? She experienced intense language training. And as a result of that language training, she was eventually able to be age-appropriate. The key with isolated children is to make sure that they are discovered earlier in years so that they do have the opportunity to become age appropriate. I forgot the number. I believe it's age, maybe if they're found after 12 or 13 years, then that could be a cutoff where they're not able to be fully socially adjusted for their age. Institutionalized children. That particular example really highlights the need for human contact. If you look at the children who were kind of just like disposed of low IQs, and then they did a research in which they separated the two groups. The children who were left in the institution started with higher IQs, but the children who were paired with mentally retarded adults actually started with lower IQs. But after time, the IQs and the point gained for the children who started with the lower IQs increased, and the level stayed basically the same for those children who did not have the human contact and were not paired with the adults. The long-term outcomes were phenomenal. And just read that on page 62. I don't want to be sensitive to your time, but read the outcomes on page 62 and how those who started out with lower IQs had the human contact and then went on to graduate from college. Majority were married. They were mostly all self-sufficient. And that's kind of just interesting that one variable, human contact, was very necessary for people to become, shows that human contact is necessary for people to become healthy human beings. Okay. And this leads us to our definition of socialization. Socialization is the process by which people learn characteristics of their group, the attitudes, values, and actions that are thought appropriate for them. So socialization is not only, it's a process of how we learn what it is to be members of certain groups, but it also shapes our culture. We talked about culture last chapter. We are not born with culture, but culture is learned. That process of how we learn culture is what socialization is. Alrighty, this is Dr. Conley, and I will continue on the next slide with socialization, how we develop a self, the mind, and emotions. Alrighty, see you in a second.